What's going on, everybody? Zack Rosenblatt back here for the latest episode of the Talk is Cheap podcast. I'm here with Darryl Slater. Quick turnaround this week, so we wanted to get you guys a pod before Thursday night's game against Washington. Disclaimer, Darryl was not at the Giants game on Sunday because he had more interesting endeavors to pursue in Charlotte, North Carolina, right?
Yeah, I would say the game was interesting for sure. In some ways, didn't turn out positively for the Jets, but
Not many things do, yeah.
no. But I think they think in some ways they'll be an interesting team. But yes, I was down in Charlotte eating barbecue and incidentally also covering the Jets game.
The Sam Darnold Bowl, as you will. But yes, I mean, he missed a pretty terrible Giants performance on Sunday. I'm sure he's read about it since then. We can run through some stuff coming out of that game. I'll cover a lot of the stuff that was in the game, but suffice to say, it was a very bad performance. I mean, when you came out of your Jets haze and all the coverage you were doing, like what'd you think when you saw what the score was of the Giants?
I think Steve Politti really hit it on the head. Nothing against your coverage, which was as usual mediocre at best. But
Oh boy.
Steve, hey, but you gotta take what you can get. But Steve, it really had an interesting column. I thought, just kind of weeding through the details. Obviously, Daniel Jones turnover, Saquon Barkley not looking like himself. Those are kind of apparent things. But I think if you look at that game, it's easy to say, look, the Giants really only scored obviously 7 points. The last 6 were lipstick on a pig there at the end. So yeah, obviously some concerns about their offense, even though their line played probably better than expected against the Broncos front. Now, the one area where you kind of look at it, like Steve wrote and said, whoa, this is an eyebrow raiser, is the way that defense played. And, you wrote about it after the game immediately, and Steve had a next day column on it. Like, this should scare the crap out of Giants fans if this defense is going to play this poorly against, Teddy Bridgewater, who, solid player, but, and now they get a quarterback in Taylor Heineke who started one game and is 0-1 as a starter on Thursday night in Washington, that they can't have a repeat performance of that defensive dud.
Yeah, I went on a radio show earlier today, and I've been asked about this a couple times. Like, if you had said in the beginning of the season they'd be playing Teddy Bridgewater and Taylor Heineke back to back, you would assume they would win both of those games. If they lose to Taylor Heineke, who he's not necessarily scrubby. He almost beat the Buccaneers in the playoffs. Like he can be scrappy, he can move around or whatever. But if you want to be taken seriously and you start 0-2 against those two quarterbacks when you have some other quarterbacks on the schedule that are going to be a lot harder, that causes a lot of concern. And like in terms of the defense, like the secondary was supposed to be the strength of this team. And I would say, Jabril Peppers only played half the snaps. He wasn't very happy about it, which is something we can talk about. Adoree Jackson, I don't think had a great game. James Bradbury maybe had his worst game as a Giants corner. I think he gave up like 6 catches on 7 targets and like 65 yards or something like that. And yeah, like the tackling was an issue. And so you had a Broncos passing attack led by Pat Shurmur, who clearly knew the defense's weakness is from coaching a lot of these guys and just exploited them. And I don't think anyone would have expected waking up on Monday morning thinking, Patrick Graham got outcoached by Pat Shurmur.
Yes, exactly. I mean, I think we can put the brakes a little bit on this Patrick Graham being a coaching genius thing. Nothing against him. Maybe that's a little bit cynical, but we've heard nothing but great things about him. Which okay, sure, But I think we need to see a little bit more of a body of work before we deem him to be one of the great defensive coordinators in the NFL today. He did a great job last season, and even he would say he has more to prove this year. And if this defense isn't, we talked about it on the first podcast, this should be a top 10 defense. They have the talent. They have a coach who's pretty darn sharp and well regarded. So let's see this group go out and be a top 10 defense. If they're not, it's a disappointment, and it doesn't reflect well on Patrick Graham if they're not a top 10 defense. Presuming guys stay healthy. Now they could get hit by injuries, but presuming guys stay healthy, and we'll get to injuries in a bit, but. For the most part, this defense, emerged from that game healthy, and has to do a better job.
They have a lot of weapons. They have Terry McLaurin, a receiver, who's given a lot of teams a lot of trouble. They have Antonio Gibson at running back, and they have a couple other weapons. I'm blanking on at receiver. They have Logan Thomas at tight end, a former Giant kind of who bounced in and off their practice squad as a quarterback a while back. and has turned into like a better tight end in the NFL than Evan Ingram, which I found kind of funny. And that was that. I mean, improbable. Yeah, improbable. Virginia Tech, improbable rise for him for sure at the position, but he was always a freak athlete at quarterback. Anyway,
Yeah,
yeah, so they're not like an easy matchup on that
he was
side.
a
But
college
I
quarterback.
mean, the main topic going to Thursday is, of course, going to be the same one we've had for the last year and a half or however long since I've been on this beat, and that's the offense and their inability to get anything going. And I think if Week 1 showed us anything, and again, like everybody overreacts to everything Week 1, but it's all we have to go on. And I think it's not even an overreaction with the Giants because this is what they were doing all last year. And Jason Garrett again called like the most bland, uninventive offense like you could possibly imagine. They opened the game with a 42-yard pass to Darius Slayton, which wasn't even necessarily the play design. It came because Denver jumped off sides, and so Daniel aired it out. He found Darius Slayton 42 yards. On the next play, the Giants ran a reverse to or an end around or whatever to Cadarius Tony. He was out in the field, and it was obvious that he was going to be the one getting the ball because that's the only time they're going to put that guy in the field. So it's not tricking anybody. So they did it. Nobody blocked Von Miller for some reason. If you watch the clip, it's really. I think Brian Baldinger actually tweeted out a little bit ago, like just how bad it was because Kyle Rudolph like did like a pretend block to make him think they were going to block him. Then he like ran out to go as if he was running on a route or something like that. And Nate Solder just completely ignored Miller. So he gets into the backfield. They lose 6 yards on that play. They run it again on the next play, second and long, which is one of Jason Garrett's favorite things to do. And they get tackled for a loss. So they go from field goal range to out of field goal range, and they have to punt it. And this is all just in the first drive. And I think Denver goes back around and scores on their end on that drive. And and then another one that sticks out to me is Logan Ryan forces a fumble deep in the Giants' own territory. So the Giants are they're pretty backed up. And rather than like trying to make some plays and get them moving, the Giants call like a very conservative, scared sort of plays. They do a run on the first play, gains like 1 yard maybe. They do a short pass attempt to Eli Penny, which goes incomplete, the fullback out of the backfield. And then they attempt to pass to Kyle Rudolph, which completes for like a couple yards. And Kyle Rudolph might be the slowest player on the roster. So they played scared there. I think they played scared. Their entire offensive game plan was to be scared of taking big shots downfield because the Broncos are good at defending them. But you still have to take the shots. Like this offense is not good enough. And Saquon clearly wasn't himself yet to the point where like the running attack was clearly not there, and they still kept trying to do all these short plays. And Jason Garrett, like just the way the routes they were running, and they weren't calling plays for Kenny Galladay, and it just like I just don't get what that guy's plan is, and at a certain point, Judge deserves criticism for that too. But I mean, you and I have talked about Jason Garrett, and we both obviously thought he should have been fired after last season, and there's been some debate about whether it's too late to fire him now or whatever. But like, what do you think about just the idea that they didn't change anything from last year, so it's not about the players clearly, right? It makes sense on
I
paper, yeah.
thought Jason Garrett was well. This just shows that I don't really
Yeah.
know anything. I'm an idiot, but I I thought when they hired him, I was like, oh, it's a pretty good hire. Thought it could work out. Oops. It has not worked out. It has worked out rather poorly. Um, on account of his uh, uncreative ways, lack of creativity, among other things, and certainly the talent and lack thereof on the offensive line has limited what they can do. I think if just talking to Trent Dilfer this week, he talked about how if you have a bad offensive line or a suspect offensive line. Now the Giants, they do. I mean, they played pretty well in the opener, but offensive line wise. But having a line that's not really solid it limits what the play caller can do. So that's kind of a caveat. But yeah, I mean, I think there's not really many excuses for him now. I mean, he has playmakers. He has Kenny Galladay. He has Daniel Jones in the second year in his offense. Like it's time to deliver some results. And I think if you look at this, the thought process for not firing in mid-year would be, okay, well, you can't change the offense. You don't have to change the offense. Like, what are you talking? Like, no one's asking you to just run Urban Meyer's offense all of a sudden. Like you have other coaches on your staff who could presumably do do a different job, better job of calling the plays within the offense that you already have. I
I would
don't
think so. I
necessarily
mean, I
think
haven't seen the
it's the
playbook, but yeah.
offense per se, right? I think
I mean, everybody points to
they
this,
have
and
enough plays in the
so
offense,
Freddie
right?
Kitchens
They
called the
have deep
plays against
shots,
the
right,
Browns, and
in their
it's
playbook.
kind of like a weird one to look at
I would
because number one,
presume.
they
I
got
mean, I
killed,
guess.
and number two,
So
Colt McCoy was the quarterback. So like in both directions, I think it's hard to like evaluate it. But they did take more shots down the field that day, and maybe that's just Joe Judge wanting to make a considered effort that day, or it's Freddie or something. But
yes,
they Judge has put Freddie in line to replace Jason Garrett at some point because he basically promoted him this offseason to where he kind of has his hands everywhere. I mean, he would be the obvious one, and I don't know. I mean, I get it. It was 1 week. They're not going to fire him after 1 week. But if they come out and again don't score any points on Thursday, and then they come out in week 3, maybe they don't want to fire him because they have a road game in New
right.
Orleans that week. So maybe go through 4 weeks. If after 4 weeks the offense is still not scoring points, like it, something has to change. You can't change your quarterback at this point. Mike Glennon is not a guy you can start. I mean, they have who they have on the offensive line. They decided to keep all those guys, so they decided the coaching was the thing. And I mean, I saw a stat. I'm gonna butcher it, but it was something along the lines of like Jason Garrett is the offense has scored like less than 20 points. I forget what the number of games. Like the majority of the games he has coached, they have scored 20 points or less. And they've only scored more than 23. I think like once or twice. And the one time they scored 30 was against the Cowboys last year, and one of those touchdowns was a defensive touchdown. So
Not good.
just like all the evidence is that it's bad. I mean, you keep seeing all these analysts, especially today, randomly, because they probably all just been watching the All 22 or whatever. Like Dan Orlovsky had a tweet. I can't even read it out because Dan generally knows what he's talking about. I think he said, "God bless the Giants' offense. It's just painful to watch scheme wise. Number one, why are you doing the things you're doing, and why are you the way that you are? Number two, where is the player given an advantage because of your scheme/call, which I think is a big thing. Like the idea of scheming a receiver open is not something Jason Garrett has done. And number three, can we change the launch point of the QB to something other than behind the center? So I mean, these are like experts. Like you and I, we're not football guys in quotes or whatever, but it's pretty obvious to see that Jason Garrett is not like calling plays to suit his offense. I think Nick Sirianni from the Eagles had a good quote today about how you build a scheme around your players. You don't build the players around your scheme. Essentially, was the idea. And the Giants, it seems like, just haven't done that for a long time, actually. But
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good approach. We'll see if Nick Sirianni winds up being a good coach for the Eagles, but I think that big picture approach is the way you have to do it in the NFL these days because you're never going to necessarily have everybody you want
yeah,
to
exactly.
run the
In terms
offense the
of
way
positive, then I
ideally
mean,
you would,
first I
right?
should say
So
Nate
you
Solder was
have to
awful
kind
at
of
right
adjust,
tackle.
and we just haven't seen a
And
lot of
Matt Parrott,
flexibility from
it
Jason Garrett.
wasn't much better when he subbed in for him, so that's going to be a problem all year. We'll get in the offensive line because it's going to look a little different on Thursday night, I think, once we start previewing. But in terms of like positive stuff, I will say the offensive line played pretty well in pass protection. Andrew Thomas had one of his better games. It was huge. I think Shane Lemieux, before he left the game, was playing pretty well. Nick Gates was solid. Will Hernandez wasn't great. But that group, you take what you can get. And Sterling Shepard kind of showed what he has been showing throughout training camp. He was their best offensive player by far. I'm a little concerned about Saquon. You kind of wrote about this today. Like they're easing him back in, and he clearly was rusty, and not quite the Saquon that you want. He wasn't really hitting holes. He wasn't really running north to south, and he's not a guy right now that's gonna break tackles. I would say so. He didn't really make an impact. It almost felt like he was a decoy out there in a way. And I don't really know if his role is going to be much bigger on Thursday. He played about 50% of the snaps.
I would expect more of the same. I mean, you're talking about a 5-day window here: Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. 2 games in 5 days, and a guy coming off serious knee surgery and a serious knee injury. So, obviously, but like I wrote today, the Giants are doing the right and smart thing by not rushing him back with an enormous workload. Now, here's the problem with that: they're going to be through 2 of their 17 games, and this guy will probably play total of about half the snaps, and so there's the problem with that for a running back is finding rhythm. Saquon even acknowledged it. He hasn't played in a full calendar year essentially, and so he needs to find rhythm. And the way a guy does that is by getting his normal amount of reps or getting a decent number of reps and not just 10 carries and one catch on 3 targets, which is what he got in the opener. So that's a challenge for him. How does he knock off the rust and find rhythm? 2 things he has to do when he is not being given the reps necessary to do those things. So at some point they're going to have to unleash him, and maybe that's week 3, and with the extra rest they're going to get after this Thursday night game. But these first 2 games are almost like an ease-in period. And again, from a medical standpoint and from a prudent standpoint, that
and I would say that
from
Devontae Booker didn't really show anything
judgment standpoint,
like
that's prudent,
carry
I
the
think.
load either, which is
but
concerning.
it comes with its drawbacks.
And one more thing about that game that I want to bring up. We talked about Cadarius Tony last week. I don't really get what they're doing with him. I know he's really raw and he didn't practice much in camp, so they want to get him some reps. But the way they used him just didn't make any sense to me. I know every team goes in with a plan of what they're going to do on their first drive or whatever, first 2 drives. They have those plays set out and they practice them all week. But they brought him out and it was pretty obvious that he was going to get the ball. He did. He lost 6 yards. He was in for another play and they did the same thing again. And I don't think he gained any yards on that. So it's not like they're bringing him out there and then they're not giving him the ball. So now you have the defense aware that, okay, that guy's out there. He's probably going to get it on a reverse. And then he didn't play almost the entire rest of the game until garbage time. And he played 5 snaps total, I think. This is a team that needs to win. And I don't really get, trying this gimmick thing. And, Jason Garrett clearly isn't creative enough to, make it work with him. But you can't just put him out there and everybody on the field knows what's going to happen. If he's not ready to play, then he's not ready to play, and don't play him.
Yeah, I mean, that's not ideal. I mean, that's and again, getting back to something that Trent Dilfer mentioned with the Jets, who also have problems on their offensive line, and he was talking about how to protect a young quarterback, and he said, look, you have to run a wide variety of plays and not be, the bottom line is not be predictable. And now that's not rocket science, of course. No offense wants to be predictable, but especially if you have a suspect offensive line. And again, the Giants' offensive line played pretty well in the opener. Does that mean they're going to have a good season? No. I mean, I think we need to see more. But the way you kind of protect an offensive line, and we'll get into how shorthanded they're going to be on Thursday, at least obviously at one spot, is shaking it up, variety of plays, not being predictable.
The other day,
Cadarius Tony
I don't even have an issue
spot,
playing him throughout the game, but to do it on the first drive and not even adjust out of that after, and for them to do it right after the 42-yard completion when they should be trying to score, so you're doing a play behind the line of scrimmage. I don't really understand. So it'll be interesting to see how they use him, how they use Saquon, if they start getting Kenny Galladay more involved, all that stuff. Because I mean, it's week 2, so calling it a must-win seems ridiculous. But if the Giants fall to 0-2, maybe you can beat the Falcons. But then, they have some tough games coming in this first half of the season, and this isn't a team that's built to come back from being down. They can't be 1-7 again.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah,
it would be a problem. I mean, look, losing to Teddy Bridgewater and Taylor Heineke would be the issue here. I mean, 0-2, not all 0-2 is created equal. I think this would be a particularly concerning 0-2. That's why I think Giants fans are looking at it as a should win. The Giants should win this game. Mathematically, is it a must win? No. I mean, morale wise, is it a must win? No, probably not. But just if you look at this, you say they lose this game, where are the wins coming from? Unless they find a way to drastically turn around the problems. Like if Heineke dices them up, I mean, my goodness, what is the rest of the season going to bring? Unless Patrick Graham can get things turned around. Now, that's a big what if.
The injury report came out today. So
it's not like Heineke's very good or proven.
Evan Ingram's going to be out, which is what was expected. Kyle Rudolph didn't really show me in week 1 that he's ready to make a huge impact. He's a little slow at this stage of his career. And his blocking wasn't especially great. So you hope that maybe he was just easing in after missing most of camp. But the big one, I guess, would be left guard Shane Lemieux. He had a knee injury early in camp. I'm blanking on what exactly the knee injury was. Dan Duggan had reported it. But it's serious enough that he had the option of getting surgery. He chose not to. He's going to play through it. and he played through it for 17 snaps, and then he didn't play the rest of the game, and then now he's out, which is not a great sign. And then my feeling about how they approach the offensive line tomorrow is that it's going to look a lot different. I think it's a very good possibility that if he doesn't start the game, I think center Nick Gates might move over to left guard at some point, and they put in Billy Price at center, a guy they traded for from the Bengals. They also have Ben Bredeson, who they traded for from the Ravens. So I think Bredeson and Price are going to see the field. So you're going to see kind of a new alignment, and you're doing that against, arguably one of the best, if not, one of the top 3 or 4 best defensive lines in the NFL. They have Chase Young and Montez Sweat coming off the edge. They have Jonathan Allen and Matthew Ioannidis, and there's one more I'm blanking on the interior, and those guys are all studs. So this is going to be a real tough challenge for guys that haven't really played with this offensive line very much yet, or Nick Gates moving over to a position that he's probably more natural at guard, but yeah, this isn't an offensive line that has a lot of strengths already. So if they're already shuffling in week 2, that's not really ideal.
No, I think like you said, the straight up replacement option is Bredeson at left guard, and then you keep Nick Gates at center, who's been pretty solid at center, even though, like you said, that's a new position for him, or was when he moved over there, last year. And then there's the drastic option, which is Gates to left guard and Price to center.
By
And
the way, they traded
Price
B.J.
is a guy
Hill
who,
for him, and B.J. Hill had 2 sacks for the Bengals in week 1.
I guess the Bengals, right, and they decided to move on from him, and former high draft pick, and just never really. Yes, so number 21 overall draft pick. I was looking that up just to be sure, but yeah, so it depends on how many waves they want to make in terms of new faces. Do they want to just put Bredeson in there at left guard and roll with it, or do they want to move Gates over and then make another move? So this Lemieux injury is going to be an issue all season, it seems, and so and then Evan Ingram. The problem with look, he can't stay on the field. He played 16 games last year, but if you look at the totality of his career, this will be the 66th possible game he could have played in. 16 in the first 4 years, obviously, and then 2 this year. He's played in 50 of them, so he's now missed 16 games, counting this Thursday night, throughout his career, and that's with him playing all 16 games last year in his 4th year. So obviously not a great way for him to start things here on the 5th-year option as he plays for a contract next offseason. So there's that, and then I think that they would like to think that Rudolph could be a somewhat decent replacement for Ingram, but look, Lemieux is not a great necessarily proven player, but the drop off is fairly significant there if you talk about having to either play Price at center or having to play Bredeson at left guard
right before the season, essentially. They did get like a 4th, and the Giants got back like a 5th or whatever it was. But I think we mentioned this last week. But the irony of them getting Bredeson is that it was they cut Kevin Zeitler, which is why the Ravens didn't need Bredeson anymore. But yeah, the Giants could really use Zeitler right now. But yeah, so the offensive line I would say is a concern. And I talked about it earlier, but they really just need to get Kenny Golladay involved much earlier in this game. He's a guy that, interestingly, like, he was way more honest than you would expect out of a guy coming into a season. Multiple times he told us that he thought the offense would start slow because all the pieces were out, and the offense started slow. And then, this week he said he thinks the offense can be explosive on Thursday. So if we want to listen to Kenny Golladay, we should have listened to him before, I guess. And if he's right, then they could win this game. Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I appreciate the honesty there. I think any one of us could have looked at it and said it's likely they're going to start slow, and sure enough, they did. I don't think that necessarily comes as a surprise, considering how few reps these guys had together in training camp. Galladay, especially, with Daniel Jones and Cadarius Tony also as well. So and you talk about Saquon Barkley getting working his way back too. So yeah, I think that's to be expected. So now they go out and play another really good defense here in Washington, and a front certainly and led by Chase Young that could make life miserable for Daniel Jones. And there's a lot of ways this game could go sideways for the Giants, for sure. I think the defense obviously has to do their
And I
part
should
against
say, and
a
I
super
alluded to this
inexperienced
earlier, but
quarterback
if
and
they lose
Heineke.
this
But
game and the offense is bad again,
you could see
I
some
think at
spots
some
in this
point we all
game
have to
where
point
it's definitely
at least
concerning for the
part of
Giants.
our fingers at Joe Judge. I mean, he's part of the offensive game plan. When he talked to us the other day, Tuesday, he didn't really. He made it sound like they might have a similar game plan to what they had against Denver, being very conservative, not really taking as many shots downfield because the defense they're playing is good at stopping them, which doesn't make sense to me. And so if their offense just comes out and is flat again, and number one, he decided to bring back Jason Garrett, and he decided to keep this offensive line the way it was, and I think he has a lot of influence in the players they bring in and the plays they call. Like he skirted criticism for most of last year from a lot of the public, just because I mean he wasn't calling plays, but I think you're starting to see the cracks a little bit because I've seen fans get a little more upset with him in this last week. He had that moment with the challenge flag, which was pretty embarrassing. He threw a challenge flag on a play that can't be challenged and lost the timeout in the second half. If they hadn't been so bad the rest of the way, that could have been pretty costly. But like, what do you think about that? Like, at a certain point, he has to, take some of the blame of what's going on here. Yeah.
For sure, you can't have it both ways. You can't one of the reasons why he kind of skated is because he doesn't call the offense or the defense, right? So people look at him as this leader, and I'm sure he's a fine leader, I guess, right? And um, take no nonsense guy, doesn't take any BS, and whipping these guys into shape, and that's all well and good. But if you're going to be a CEO coach, which he is, right, you have to take the heat for the CEO type stuff. Everything trickles up, flows up, if you will. All the decisions kind of come back to him, or do come back to him. Certainly, we've seen his imprint on some of these moves that the Giants have made. Obviously Dave Gettleman is still the general manager, but it's clear that Joe Judge has some say, a significant say in what the Giants do. So yeah, I mean, we can knock Gettleman for some of the things he's done in the past. The Nate Solder contract, obviously, Joe Judge had nothing to do with that. But if you talk particularly about the offensive line with the way they did not address guard this offseason after cutting Kevin Zeitler, yeah, I think that gets back to Joe Judge certainly because he approves or certainly has a significant input with a lot of these moves that they do or don't make. So and yes, obviously he's he was, whether you want to call it paired with Jason Garrett, but he decided to keep Jason Garrett after last season. He, worked with him certainly for a year, saw what he was all about, even if there was a strong push from above for Garrett to be the offensive coordinator for Judge in year one. Judge could have made a decision there to move on. He decided not to, and has thrown his support behind Garrett, and that flows back to Judge for sure as the CEO coach. So I don't think you can have it both ways and be a guy who is, this distanced leader from the game planning stuff in terms of the offense, defense, calling plays, and then just not take any responsibility. Not to say he's not taking responsibility, but I'm sure he's willing to take heat. But in terms of deserving the heat, I think we're beginning to see, as you said, a little bit more. Going in Judge's direction that way. And maybe they go out and win by 14, 20 points on Thursday and everyone kind of forgets about all this for a week. But, it's a week to week league, as they say. So I think, this has a chance if they lose this game to really sour some things and you'll really start to see for the first time, I would think,
Yeah.
sentiment within the
So if
fan
they're
base, and you're
0-2,
seeing it a
how
little
many
bit
years in a
already,
row is it now that they've been
kind of
0-2? I can't
go,
remember. I've like
go a little bit more skeptically against Judge. Maybe that's the right word.
What about now? Yeah, yeah.
That's a great question. I mean, the stat I dug up the other day, in terms of their slow starts, I mean, even beyond just 0-2, yeah, since the Giants' last winning season, they last had a winning season in 2016. Since then, starting in 2017,
Okay,
their
so
record
if
in
you don't
September
count
and
the one year
October is 5 and
that 1 year they made the
26.
playoffs in McAdoo,
So
they've been 0-2
that
every
gets
year
beyond
dating
just
back to
0-2. I mean, you're
2013.
talking about being bad in the first 2 months of the season.
Yeah. So that's 2013, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. Yeah, so it would be like
That's an insane stat.
it would be 8 of 9 years basically if they do that again this year.
Just not 16. Yeah.
Yeah. So
13,
Giants fans
14, and
certainly
15,
are frustrated by
17,
that, I
18,
would say.
19, 20. Yeah, that's remarkable. And this would drop them. Yeah, I mean, and this would drop them to 5-27 in the first 2 months of the season, and that's just over the. I could go back to those previous years that you said. I just went back to their last winning season, but yeah, I mean, you're starting. I think it's a here we go again thing maybe for Jets and Giants fans because um, Jets are 10-29 since their last winning season in the months of September and October. So
Wow.
those have been those sink your season. I mean, I know everyone talks about how strong the Giants finished last
Yeah.
year. They started 1-7. They started one and
But they missed the
seven. Like,
playoffs
I
because
mean,
they didn't win
that's
one of
almost
those
impossible
8
to overcome.
games.
And guess what? They didn't overcome it. Like, yeah, I mean, they played to the end of the season in the playoff race because they had a bad division. Right, right. But they missed the playoffs. Exactly. They missed the playoffs, but they went 5-3 down the stretch. And they went 1-7 to start the year. Like, yeah, I mean, they came close because they were in a bad division, but again, um, this is how you sink your season. I mean, they were 1-6 in September and October last year. Then they lost the first game in November. They rattle off 4 straight wins after that, but um, you can't necessarily make your season in September and October, but I think certainly if
It's
you
pretty
have
hard
that
to
kind
get
of
back from a 1
really
and 7
crummy start,
loss. You
you
have to be
can
in the worst
more
division of all
often
time
than
to do
not.
that,
I
which
think
they
last
were.
season being an outlier, you can just sink the whole darn thing in the first 2 months of the season. Yeah, I, yeah, it's not
Yeah.
happening this year. I mean, it didn't happen last year.
So
They didn't make
let's.
the playoffs,
So
but like,
what was your
yeah, I mean,
prediction
if
for
they
this week?
start
I
one
can't
and
remember
six,
what I
1-7
predicted. So
again,
let me look.
yeah, it's done. The season's over. Oh,
I
that's a
did have
great
the
question.
Giants winning. I don't feel great
You
about
know,
it.
I don't know. Let's see.
Uh,
I'll as we're talking here, I'll make sure it matches up with what I guess those we're publishing those. Yeah, I have them winning as well. We'll have that
over.
up on the site
Okay.
later tonight if people want to check that out. We have all of our picks as usual up there.
Oh
And
wow, that makes
do
me
you
feel
have
even
yours in
worse
front of
about
me?
it.
I'm going through
I
and
have the
trying to
Giants
find
winning
mine.
13-10. As you can tell, I'm not confident in their offense.
I think
So
everyone on
and
our
if they
staff
win, I see
picked
their defense
the
kind of winning it
Giants.
for them
I picked.
essentially.
Okay. I'm on the same.
It's just hard to predict them
For
scoring
some reason,
touchdowns,
I picked the
honestly.
Giants
And it's
20
funny.
to
The one thing
13. I don't know if they're going to score
we somehow
20,
like
maybe
skipped over
17-13
probably
if
we
I
talked
had to
about
do
so many
that
times
again.
that Daniel Jones turned the ball over again in the
But
red zone.
yes,
So as long as he keeps doing that, like I don't believe they can do anything on offense. So I mean, I will say against Washington is when he's had all of his good games in his career.
yeah, that's a great point. I mean, yeah, maybe I'm thinking here in 20 to 13 that he has one of his rare turnover-free games, and yep, exactly right. So 20 to 13, maybe 17-13. I think a low-scoring defensive game. And in terms of Jones, he's got 40 turnovers in 28 games, and like, so I was curious, and I went and crunched the numbers. So he's turning over 1.43 times a game, and I won't go through all the numbers, but that's a higher rate than Sam Darnold had with the Jets, and it's a higher rate than Mark Sanchez had with the Jets, even if you count Mark Sanchez's all of his games, regular season and playoffs, or if you just count the regular season. So, Darnold and Sanchez especially were known for being turnover
Yeah,
machines,
I mean he has
and
40 turnovers in his career, which
28
is most
games
in
of
the
his
NFL.
career and
I
40
think
turnovers,
he's
Daniel
lost
Jones is
18
turning the ball
fumbles,
over more than
and
either of those guys.
only one other quarterback, Carson Wentz, has even fumbled the ball at all 18 times, and he's fumbled it 30 times on his own, like without losing all of them. So, like it's like an abnormal amount to the point where it's. I mean, he fumbled it in
Crazy.
college too. Like this has always been a problem, and at a certain point, everybody needs to accept he's not going to get better at it, and you just hope that. The thing is, like his rookie year, he turned the ball over a lot, but he also produced a lot of points. He had 24 touchdown passes. He had 11 last year, and he had one last week. So, if you almost are more okay with the turnovers if they were actually like taking shots, but the Giants are so scared on offense to do anything that they don't even do that, so they don't score and he turns the ball over. So it's like a vicious cycle, I guess. But yeah, all right, we can wrap up on that. We'll get back to you guys on our podcast next week. It'd be nice if we could do it after something more positive, but this Giants team likes to make us be negative all the time. We don't do it on purpose. But on that note, we'll wrap up there. Make sure you're subscribed if you're not subscribed already. We're on all the podcast apps, and we'll talk to you guys next week.
Acast recommends more podcasts, more episodes, more great shows. Keep listening to hear a new show we recommend.
In a home in the suburbs, a boy dreamed of saving all the poor children of the world. He built a charity that attracted the world's top celebrities.
Hey, I'm Justin Bieber, and this is We Did.
This has become your life's work.
But behind the scenes,
things started popping up.
Allegations about corruption, blackmail.
This is the story of a charity that did well when it was supposed to be doing good. The White Saviors, a Canadaland original podcast.
Acast recommends.